We'll start off by talking about the most basic element of design, the line. Lines are everywhere. If you look around, you'll find them in your day-to-day life all over the place. They can be straight, like raw spaghetti. They can be curved, like the crescent moon or the graceful bend of a swan's neck. Or they can be squiggly, like a snake wiggling through the sand. They can be fat, thin, dotted, wavy, or angular. The simplest of elements is the line. With a single stroke of a pencil or your computer mouse, you can call this element into play. You can then manipulate the mood of your design or organize your page depending on the kind of line you've drawn and its placement on your format. At their basic, lines can add strength to an idea or communicate a feeling. Lines can be fat or thin, long or short, curved or straight, sharp or fuzzy. They could be composed of dots or dashes, or they could be created with squared off or rounded corners. Each one has its own distinct personality that will bring a unique flavor to the piece in which they are used. Whether lines appear as a graphic element, such as a logo or illustration, or the lines themselves are the graphic element, such as frames or dividers, use them purposefully in the overall design of your layout. Lines can be used for different things. They can organize, like showing you where to color in a coloring book. They could direct, think of the dotted line on a road. They could separate, think when you fill out a form and it says, don't write anything under this line. They may suggest an emotion. A jagged line like lightning can look violent and menacing, or they could create rhythm, like a picket fence or waves in the ocean. You can use lines to do things in your layouts. A rule is a line that separates one part of your layout from another. Vertical rules can be used to separate columns. You can use dotted or dashed lines to connect information, such as items on a menu. Some ways that you might use lines in your design are to organize and connect or separate, to create movement or to generate a pattern or rhythm, to provide texture, to convey a mood or emotion, to define shapes, such as an outline of an element to set it off from other elements in your layout. They may provide emphasis. They may highlight or stress words, perhaps provide a framework, maybe connect bits of information, like a caption to the photo that it describes. They may direct a viewer's eye or create some sort of sense of motion. A diagonal line looks more active than a horizontal one. Or possibly they may be used to create a grid or a graph. You can use lines to create a mood. Once you've picked the type of line or lines that you'll use, shaping and placing them is equally important in creating a mood. If you look at the examples shown here, in the first example, you can see that the simple horizontal line is placed centrally in the format. It feels comfortable and calm, and it's surrounded by plenty of white space. When the exact same line is placed off-center and at an angle, such as shown right here, a more active feeling is suggested. Horizontal lines typically communicate a restful feeling, while vertical lines denote some sort of movement, or in this case, because I have several vertical lines, they denote some sort of organized activity. Angular lines can add tension and random action to a design, and a curved line, like the examples that are shown right here, can be used to establish direction. In addition to establishing direction, they also give the design a flowing or more moving feel. Who can appreciate the beauty of soft rounded hills as you stare out over the landscape? You might contrast that with the hard angular feel of mountains that jut up from the ground. Lines are responsible for the mood of these two contrasting natural settings. A dashed line on the road indicates the proper lane divisions. This dashed line also indicates permission to pass another vehicle, while a solid line prohibits passing. As you start to appreciate the influence of a line, you can't help but notice the parts that lines play in our everyday lives. You can use lines as an organizer. When used appropriately, line is a powerful element that can be employed not only for communication, but also for organization. Lines can be used on a page either to join related information or to divide unrelated information. As an exercise, try opening a copy of your favorite magazine and notice how often lines are used in this way. For instance, you may notice how they're used to join an article and an accompanying photograph. Or you might notice how the lines are used often to frame a photograph or some sort of graphic and separate it from the type or other graphics that surround it. Often, lines are used to separate sidebar information from the rest of the page. Borders, which are basically nothing more than lines organized around a shape, also qualify as organizational tools. Even when they're used to border an entire page, like shown here, you can see that the National Geographic magazine always has a thick yellow line that appears around its artwork. This yellow line has branded the look of their magazine, and it basically is just the border that is being used here is basically just a line that's used for identification and branding. The line is best friends with the grid. Grids are created on the format to give the designer a designated position for type, shapes, textures, or other lines. Often type is placed in organized columns on the page to cue the reader to the flow of text. Grid lines are sometimes drawn to designate columns or the position of artwork. As a bonus, when the grid lines appear throughout a brochure or a magazine, the piece is given rhythm that adds structure and unity to the design. You can see in this example, the grid is very apparent, and that's because the line actually outlines the grid in this corporate identification packaging. It's a very effective, structured way to be able to place the information in some sort of format like this. In this example down here, the lines are actually used to create more of a texture in the artwork. Lines can definitely be effective in adding texture to your artwork. These curved lines, they definitely give the feel of flow and lead the user's eye through the piece, but they also add a texture to the piece as well. Lines are often found in pairs or groups. Lines of the same general appearance or lines that are quite different can form a variety of patterns that create textures, suggest movement, or lead the eye, the same way that single lines might. If you aren't creating original illustrations or doing logo design, your main concern with this part of the study of lines is being able to recognize the patterns in illustrations and how they're going to affect the design. You may or may not want to project an image into your project. If you look at these simple illustrations of lines here, you can see how the patterns are going to illustrate static, dynamic, and random uses of lines and how they convey different feelings. If we look at these, in the first example here, I have uniform blue and white lines, and they alternate at even intervals. This creates a very static, orderly, and conservative type of look. If we contrast this to this example, which basically has uniform lines, but these lines are a little bit wider and they're evenly spaced and they're horizontal, this also creates a static, stable, and orderly type of look. When we come down to example C, you can see how uneven spacing of otherwise uniform lines creates the impression of movement. This is a dynamic layout and it creates an orderly progression. In this example right here, the progression moves in from either side, giving the illusion of roundness. This also is dynamic. It shows orderly progression and a little bit of dimension as well. In example E, we've varied the line widths and the distances to create a more random pattern. This is dynamic, chaotic, and disorderly. And finally, in example F, the uniform size and spacing of the lines is definitely apparent, but the lines have now been made into curved shapes, and this creates a lot of movement, although it is a controlled movement. So this gives you the feel of dynamic and orderly flow. What to consider when using lines? Have you ever chosen lines that convey an appropriate mood or strengthen your idea in the same way? Have you given thought to the full array of possible types of lines that you might want to use? Thick versus thin, sharp versus fuzzy, wavy versus straight? How do the lines you choose organize your design? Are you using the line to connect or separate other elements on the page? Do the lines actually lead the eye in the way that you intended? Have you thought of using a border as a design element? Are you able to use lines to establish a grid? That is, do your lines that you're using support columns of type or photographs? And do the lines appear in the same position from page to page, giving your design structure and unity? An underlying grid can be quite valuable, even if the grid lines themselves are invisible in the design. The artwork that you use on your page will actually create the lines just by being in blocks of columns or rows. Does the use of line create texture in your design or illustration? Does the texture reinforce your ideas? Are you using lines wisely? Are there lines in your design that are freeloading on the design, which basically means they're not performing a service of any kind? Remember that you need to remove any lines from your design that are not contributing to your idea. Unnecessary lines will serve only to distract from your idea. We're going to look at a couple of ads that use lines and kind of deconstruct how the line is used. This ad right here is for Kenstar, and the lines that are used here create a mood. There's a breezy feeling. The line quality achieves this breezy feeling by using thin, wispy lines, and they sometimes kind of curl and wrap around. This also helps to add to the light, kind of less serious mood of the piece. The lines are soft and there's no angles to them, although they do get a little chaotic in certain spots. If we look a little bit closer, you'll see that in addition to lines, there's also arrows that are directing the flow and leading your eye. Even the text that's used here, breeze that pampers, is incorporated into the line structure and flows with the line structure right here. Lines don't have to be straight. This is an all too common misconception about the line. Think of a skyline. It's not straight and much more visually interesting than just using a straight horizon. Lines also define the shape of the rocking chair right here. There's no solid area of color that holds this function like you might usually see. The thin, curving, soft lines are also relatively feminine, and along with the font that's being used, it's also more of a feminine type feel. It kind of makes you feel like what a woman would go to the spa for. This ad overall has a very feminine type of feel. Similar to the lines in this composition that create the shape, they also serve to create a texture. The arrowheads show the direction of the little air currents and provide some sort of visual texture to the piece. The next example that I'd like to look at is this ad for Kindle, the little book reader that Amazon is selling. And this ad has a very hand-drawn feel. The look of the ad says many things about the mood that they're trying to create. The use of the organic lines is a good example of how to use lines to create mood that is lighthearted. The focus is more on simplicity and low tech. The design is able to effectively communicate the message to the viewer. The human form needs no more than minimal detail to express the impending catastrophe. Use of line and free form, organic lines help to convey the message that the books are low-tech and have inherent problems, while the product, the Kindle, provides a simple solution. It's free of the issues that you see here. The sketchy look and feel of the lines also give a feeling of messy dishevelment as opposed to the simple, clean, trouble-free product that they're emphasizing. And you can see even the product is shown just free of any other distractions at all. The juxtaposition between the high and the low tech, the clean and messy, is a clever way to reinforce the message of the ad. The next example that I want to look at is this ad for the National Museum of Nuclear Science and History. The unmistakable form of the nuclear symbol or of the bomber airplane right here are made entirely of lines. This is a clever way to grab the viewer's attention. Not only does the primary element, the lines, make up the same shape of the bomber and the symbol, but they're also in the form of a maze. The tagline on the ad reads, "You won't leave the way you came." The maze complements this message, while the design of the maze helps to graphically grab the user's attention and support this particular museum. The weight of the lines is strong and powerful, again supporting the underlying business that the ads are emphasizing. The last example we're going to be looking at is this ad for Cedar Creek Tradesman Home Remodeling. This ad uses lines that are both used in the main design and also used as a unifying and supporting element. The grout lines in the tile create a grid which help to frame and support the main artwork in the ad right here. The hand-drawn figure in the matchbook conveys a sense of friendliness and trust. You may just jot down a note to a friend on a matchbook or a scrap of paper. This helps convey the sense of casualness and trust. The grout lines on the tile help to unify the ad, and they make a good repeating background. It works as a really good visual to help bring the focus to the matchbook, and therefore the main image on the page. The logo and the supporting text are also encased in a stroked rectangle down here at the bottom. And this separates the image, this information, the logo, and the additional text information and frames it. The use of lines help to support the text and aid in leading the viewer comfortably through the ad. The diversity of the line weights and the styles also helps to setting importance in the various parts of the ad. The contrast of the black lines on the white matchbook, focus your attention here. The grid lines, the grout lines right here creating the grid, also focus your attention in towards the middle. And then finally this lighter line that appears around the logo and the accompanying text down at the bottom, just frame it, but you can see that the weight is much lighter. This is definitely a secondary element to this one right here. So hopefully this has given you a little bit of insight about how line is used effectively in different types of materials, and you may consider line a little bit more than you have in the past.